So it is now 1972, March of 1972, and we are on the way to Atlanta, Georgia. That is myself and James and Frankie, my German Shepherd. And we're riding in my new Volvo, 1971 Volvo 240. I financed it. It was $3,600, and I financed it through the credit union at Cessna. And I borrowed $300 from the bank for the down payment. I had things figured out by this time. Yes. So we stopped at James's parents in Florence, Alabama, adjacent to the famous Muscle Shoals, famous for the famous rock and roll studio there, and on to Atlanta, where his sister was married to an airline pilot, and they gave me a little guidance about where I should stay if I was going to work at Lockheed, Georgia, which was just outside northwestern Atlanta in Marietta, Georgia. The first night I stayed in a Red Roof Inn, and then I moved to the Holiday Inn in Marietta, which was convenient because they had a little kennel area for Frankie outside. Yes, so that was great. But I started to reminisce that. I'm thinking, my goodness, I'm going to work for Lockheed, on a program set up by the U.S. Air Force to study certain structural problems on the Lockheed C-5A, the major transport, airplane for the U.S. Air Force. This is pretty big time, I thought. And I thought back to, my origins, and my earliest recollection was of an air raid time, right? I was being dragged by my mother through the darkened streets, blacked out streets, through the streets to the local park where the air raid shelter was underground. And my mother was holding my baby, the middle brother of the three of us later, Walter, she was holding Walter. And we got to the park, and I was fascinated because in the park was the anti-aircraft battery, right? The big guns, the searchlights, the hearing things, the battery, mostly manned by women because just like my dad, men were away, wherever, right? My dad was in the Merchant Marine. He was dodging German submarines in the North Atlantic. His job, he told me, was he was chief cook and baker and machine gunner. And, I didn't realize the risks that meant, but he was lucky to survive the war, My mom was a cook for the local fire brigade. And you might think, well, why did they need a cook for the fire brigade? Well, because the firemen were out, pretty much 24/7, putting out fires from the German air raids, where mostly they dropped incendiary bombs. They had one large weapon, one somewhat strategic weapon, and it was actually a Navy mine that was dropped, suspended from a parachute. So when it hit, whatever the roof of a building or whatever it hit, it sent out a blast for the whole neighborhood. So I remember my bedroom had a little crack. It was a brick house, and it had a little crack that went down between the bricks, and that was because one of those mines had hit the local. There was a laundry just on the end of the street where we lived, and it was a big concrete building, and that flattened that concrete building. That building was huge slabs of concrete, like sloped down to the basement, which filled up with water. And me and my friends used to go play in that area, even though we were not supposed to do that, and it was dangerous, right? But anyway, the interesting thing is the kids, right? They didn't know any better, What they had was what they had. And when we went into the air raid shelter underneath the park, there were all the neighbors, all our kid friends, and we used to run around through these tunnels, and the Adults had their little radios and their little tea brewing machines, you know. So it was just life. That's what life was like. When the bombing got really bad, they moved us out of the city. Me and my brother, little brother Walter, we were moved. You know, they put us on a bus, and we went out to some. We were billeted to some farm family out of the city, and it was very nice. It was a little. It wasn't really a farm. It was just a. It was just a out of the town countryside little house. It had a duck pond though, and I remember I fell into the duck pond one day, and I never forget the scenery, the scene of what it looks like, what ducks look like from below the water, you know, with their little legs sticking down. That's a picture I have from then. And the only reason I know the date of that was 1942, we were evacuated. The only reason I know that is because my mom was pregnant at the time with our little brother, right? And she had to go to the hospital one weekend. She used to come weekends and do laundry for us, you know, and visit us kids. But one weekend she had to go to hospital. So my youngest brother was born not in Old Trafford, like me and Walter, but David, the youngest brother, was born in Hale, a city on the outside of Manchester. A nice, you know, more elite, more quiet city. Thank you.
Thank you.